Dundalk FM. Town Talk.
Now, childminding, it's a concern for many people out there, and there is even perhaps a risk of a bigger concern because the recent reports are saying that up to 80% of childminders could close, and very concerning. And I'm joined by a childminder, Leigh and Gilmore, who will talk to us a little bit more about that. You're very welcome to the show, Leigh.
Thank you very much, Pat, for having me.
And I'm just reading stuff from Childminding Ireland, and there's some real concerns. Can you maybe explain a little bit more as to why childminders might close as many as 80%?
Well, up to now, it has not been obvious how many childminders exist in the country. When we minded small numbers of children, we didn't have to register with TUSLA. So if you minded more than 4, you had to register with TUSLA. But many of us chose to register with Childminding Ireland as Childminding Ireland members. And to do that, it meant we were Garda vetted, insured, first aid trained, all of that. Plus, we had a lot of support from Childminding Ireland in, running our business and connecting with other childminders and so on. And the government has decided, and I get that childminding costs and childcare costs for parents can seem exorbitant, but let me tell you, it doesn't feed back that childminders earn a lot of money because we do keep our numbers small because we're only one person at the end of the day. So the government want to offer this subsidy to a lot of families, to all families, I think. And in doing so, they've decided then that means childminders have to come in under the TUSLA umbrella to be, I suppose, monitored, for want of a better word. You can understand they're putting their funds somewhere they feel they need to have a say in, or a reassurance, I suppose, about the service. However, the regulations that were drafted are not suitable for childminding. They're basically based around what works for centre-based care. By that I mean creches and preschool care and things like that. They're not suitable for the family-run homes of childminders. That's what.
So somebody like yourself. So you're childminding at home.
Exactly. And we made this clear to them when we saw the drafts. We were offered an opportunity of consultation, but personal feeling is that consultation was not so much consultation. It was more like, we put these very, very generalised regulations out there, caused a huge amount of fear among all of us. We all had major panic attacks, but we had no detail with which to kind of sort through all of it. There was just generalised statements. So, of course, then when we went back with our feedback, the next thing it was all kind of reworded a bit to make it look like, we're listening. But in fact, then the main issues remained, and on those they did not budge and have not budged. And it is for those reasons that I personally have made the decision that I do not feel able to stay, because the nature of my business would be so different to what I do now and would take so much more of my time away from my family in order to comply with what it looks like we are going to be expected to do, that I don't feel I can continue as a childminder.
And we'll come back to that in a moment, but the 80%, what percentage of childminding is in homes as opposed to creches and the like?
Well, you see, for that you need to know how many childminders exist in the country, and we don't know that.
Okay.
Because there are many childminders, and please don't misread this, that they're underhand in any way. There's just a lot of childminders that don't register, never did.
Yeah.
They're neighbours who, in a neighbour's kids, and
that's how my kids were minded, I have to say.
Exactly. So there are, the government themselves can't tell you how many. Let's put it this way, the early estimates were between 15,000 and 35,000.
Wow.
That's a big gap. So, they don't know.
So potentially there's 15,000 or so people out there like yourself who are childminding who are now thinking, is it worth the bother?
Kind of. It's not even that. The decision I made was not an easy one, Pat. It was absolutely devastating for me to come to this decision, because when I decided to childmind 17 years ago, my own boys were very small and I knew I loved kids. But when I started to childmind, I realised I loved working with kids. And when my boys grew up and went off to secondary school, people would say, now, will you go back to the office? I was a PA, and I was like, oh God, no. And my plan was to do this until my body physically could no longer go to the park and run around with them, sit on the floor, do jigsaws, whatever it was. That was my plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the 80%, just so that you understand where that's coming from, that is coming from a survey Childminding Ireland ran.
All right.
So it mostly would encompass childminding members. I think the survey, we tried to share it out among the wider population to see did it land. But that 80% has come from a survey Childminding Ireland sent out to its members to see how many of us were actually thinking of leaving or staying or waiting and seeing.
And if that does come through, obviously that's going to be an absolute disaster and runs totally against what I think the government is trying to do, is to reduce the cost of childminding and I suppose keep it good for everybody.
Well, and that's it. But you see, the problem here is in trying to reduce the cost, they're not really looking at what they're asking of childminders. They're looking at the parents and what they're paying and trying to help that. But they're not looking at what that onus they are going to put on childminders is going to be. The level of administration is going to be significant. We have heard from a couple of childminders who are going to reduce to a 4-day week so they can spend the 4th day doing administration work.
So the onus of the paperwork, let's put it that way, the administration work is considerable, and perhaps if you have a large creche or the like, it's okay, but if you're one person working at home, it's not practical.
100%, Pat. And this is what happened in the UK. My best friend from childhood was a childminder in the UK, and I remember us chatting one time, and she said, we have to do the exact same paperwork as the creche. That friend no longer childminds. The childminding industry in the UK was decimated. They went, I think the numbers were something like they had 10,000 childminders down to 1,200 in something like 10 years or something.
Okay. And again, trying to see, and you did say earlier from the government's perspective, introducing, how would I put it, extra checks and controls and things like guarda vetting, etc. There is a good reason for doing that. I'm not saying that people like yourself are in any compromise, but you have to appreciate where the government's come from. They don't want to be paying money if the thing isn't vetted, if it isn't administered properly.
100%. But you have to remember, Pat, as members of Childminding Ireland, we are Garda vetted, and we have to.
Of course, yeah.
Make sure. So we're Garda vetted, we're first aid trained, we have our childminding insurance through a group scheme with Childminding Ireland, and we complete the TUSLA course, child safeguarding course. And again, that also, you have to show that you've renewed that child safeguarding course. I think it's every 3 years. So, when I'll put it to you this way. When I have parents come to meet me, if I have a vacancy, they walk in and they're expecting, like many of us, oh, that's a nice lady and her family seem lovely. And the next thing I come and say, by the way, just so you know, I'm a member of Childminding Ireland, I'm Garda vetted, I'm insured, I'm first aid trained. And when I say, their faces drop in a good way. They look at me and they're kind of going, they weren't expecting that level of reassurance. Mm-hmm. And that is there. So what the government are doing, and 100%, we need Garda vetting. We need all of that must be there. But it is there for many of us. But this extra administration will not contribute in any meaningful shape, way or form to the health and safety and well-being of a child. Our privacy is at stake because if we register with TUSLA, our full home address and our name will be on their website. That to me is an absolute no-go area. Training. At the moment, the regulations state training as deemed appropriate by the government. We have no idea, is that like a first aid course, which we do one Saturday every 2 years. Again, that's our personal time, but okay, obviously we need to keep up our certifications. Or is this going to be, you have to do a FETAC level 5, it'll be 2 evenings a week for 6 months. Who pays for that? Where does that time come from? It's our personal time. So I'm not poo-pooing what the government are trying to do. I'm not being negative for the sake of being negative. I know certain regulation needs to happen, but it needs to happen with a childminder or somebody who understands childminding leading the way. not trying to go, well, this worked for creches, so we'll just squish it around here a little bit and we'll trim off this and we'll do this and that'll work for childminders. And that's basically what is happening.
I'm just thinking what might happen next. Childminding Ireland, and you're a member of Childminding Ireland,
yes.
But not every childminder is. So Childminding Ireland, I think from what you said earlier, there was some consultation, but it didn't perhaps get the recognition or it didn't get implemented in the way that you would have hoped. What can anybody do now, particularly for those that are not associated with Childminding Ireland? What's the likely outcome?
Well, the thing is, Childminding Ireland, we've always kind of, as members, whenever we'd meet other childminders on our travels, we've always kind of said, look, you should sign up to Childminding Ireland, simply because they're a wonderful source of advice and support for childminders, but also in things like this, where they are trying very hard to get the government to see we can make something work, but you've got to work with the childminders. And that hasn't happened. The consultation was letting us sit at the table. They didn't take on board what we said. And that's not really, in my opinion, true consultation. Other childminders, this has been very kind of quiet. It needs to be in the press. I've met childminders, and they've just more or less told me, and they're not members of Childminding Ireland. I've met them, and I've said, are you aware of these regulations? And they're like, yeah, but, look, I'm not doing that. That's basically what I've been told by a couple of minders that I've met. And you see, at the end of the day, and this is the other scary part, if childminders stay and sign up and regulate and dance through all the hoops and whatever, that's fine. But if childminders who have always kind of done their own thing and they're not notified to a county childcare committee or Childminding Ireland, if anyone lets the government know once 2027 comes in that these childminders exist, they will be seen as an illegal daycare. And that is one of the reasons I'm leaving, because I could not possibly take the risk of saying to the lovely family that I currently mind for, who's devastated that I'm leaving, and I am devastated to lose them, but I couldn't turn around and say, all right, look, I'll say nothing, I mind for you, and sure, we'll keep it quiet. Because I can't do that. I can't be seen to be running something illegal when all I'm doing is offering a happy, safe, wonderful place for children, as I have done for 17 years.
And is that the actual likely outcome of this, that in 2027, that when all of this follows through, that childminders who are working effectively at the moment, will be illegal?
Yes, that is in the regulations. TUSLA will be given powers to close down illegal childminding settings.
What do we do? I don't know.
I wish I knew, because I wanted to stay.
Yeah.
He didn't want this. All I can say is talk to your childminders, pulling them in the direction of Childminding Ireland's least support and visibility, and talk to your TDs. Ask them to please take this seriously, because remember, Pat, the knock-on effect is this: if there aren't, and right now, don't misunderstand me, there is a childcare shortage, even as things stand currently today. The amount of phone calls that I have taken over the years saying, I'm so sorry, my service is full, I'm so sorry, my service is full. But if somebody can't find a childcare place, that puts one member of a parenting team out of work. That in itself means the government is losing that income tax. It means they're probably going to have to pay some sort of social welfare payment. And so basically the cost is much, much, much greater than sitting down and designing regulations with childminders and with childminding experts' advice. That is my personal opinion, and that's not me reading between the lines in the media. That is what I personally believe. That is how bad I can see this going if the government don't just sit down and say, okay, what we're trying to finagle here, trying to push us into some kind of a regulatory system that has worked for creches, and we'll make small little concessions here, there, and everywhere. It isn't going to work. It has to be done with childminders involved. I said all along when this was coming down the road, why not make Childminding Ireland an overseeing body of all childminders? Because we have to meet those minimum requirements.
Yeah.
And I know too that they want to do inspections of our homes and everything. But our homes are inspected every day. My parents come through all of my downstairs. They meet their kids playing in the playroom, or they might walk through my whole house out to the backyard if we're playing out the back on a nice day. They see my home. They see the state of it, which thankfully it's pretty clean. They see the toys their children play with. They see the area that their children are minded in every single day. So, the fact that somebody feels the need to have an overseeing person come in and say, oh yeah, well, I don't like the corners on that table. Now, sorry, I'm being facetious in a little way because I don't know what the inspections would look like. And that's the thing, we don't have the detail.
Look, it is a real issue, and it's something that if people like you weren't speaking out, it might just happen unnoticed, and literally 10 or 15,000 childminders could just melt away, and then we've got a big, big problem. So I hope you get heard. I hope that Childminding Ireland gets heard, and that those that are out there perhaps would think about perhaps becoming part of Childminding Ireland. That would be part of the solution. It's a real issue, but thank you again, Leigh Gilmore, for a childminder who happens to be a member of Childminding Ireland, for bringing this to our attention, and it is a real issue, and I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me time to say.
Thank you very much.
You and everything, Pat. All right, take care now.
All the best now. That's Leigh Gilmore, a childminder, and up to 80% of childminders could close ahead of the new childminding system that's coming in. So it's a real concern.
97.7 Dundalk FM. Town Talk.